When we order fractions, we use something called the leg strategy. L-E-G stands for less than 1/2, equal to 1/2, and greater than 1/2. So all of these we are comparing to 1/2. In order to do that, we begin by looking at our denominator. Our denominator is 10. Half of 10, or 10 divided by 2, would be 5. I then want to compare my numerator 4 to half of my denominator. Half of my denominator is 5. 4 is less than 5. So I'm going to add an L to this one. 4/10 is less than 5/10, which is the same thing as 1/2. When I take the next number and I take the 9 and I divide it in half, 9 divided by 2 is 4 5/10. If I compare my numerator 8 to 1/2, or 4.5, I see that 8 is larger than 4.5, so I use the G for greater. That was probably confusing what I said. We don't use the L for larger. The L is for less. The G is for greater. The third problem, I come to my denominator 5. 5 divided by 2 is 2 5/10. I'm going to compare my denominator, or my numerator 3, to 1/2, which is 2.5, and I'm going to see that 3 is greater than 2 5/10 out of 5, which is equal to 1/2. So therefore, this one is also a G. Half of 4, 4 divided by 2 is 2. My 2 in my numerator is equal to 2. So therefore, this fraction is equivalent to 1/2, and I give it an E. Finally, my last fraction, my 3, when I divide it into two groups, is 1 5/10. I have 1 compared to 1/2, which is 1 5/10, and I make that an L. If I wanted to put these fractions in order from least to greatest, I will need to begin by grouping my numbers and looking and seeing that my numbers that have L's are going to be less than 1/2. So I want to begin with those. I'm going to come over to the side and cross multiply. Cross multiplication allows me to figure out which number is greater. 3 times 4 is 12. 10 times 1 is 10. When I compare my numbers, I see that 12 is greater than 10, or 10 is less than 12. Therefore, this number is smaller, 1/3, and 4/10 is greater. So my first number will be 1/3. My second smallest number will be 4 out of 10. After I take care of my least numbers, then I can go here to my E and know that this number is not smaller than 1/2. It's not greater than 1/2. Exactly, it is exactly 1/2. So therefore, I will bring that down. Here were my L's that I cross-multiplied and compared. Here is my G. And then finally, there's my E. And then finally, here are my G's. Again, I'll come over here to the side, 8/9 and 3/5. I know they're both greater than 1/2, but I don't know which one's larger. So I will cross-multiply. 5 times 8 is 40. 9 times 3 is 27. And after multiplication, I can see that 27 is smaller. So therefore, 3/5 is less than 8/9, or 8/9 is greater than 3/5. So 3/5 will go next. And finally, 8/9 will go last. These are my G's that I came over here to the right and I cross multiplied. Now, a second way I can figure this out is I can take and I can look and see that each of these have a fraction bar. The fraction bar is another way to write the division symbol. So I could take 1 divided by 3 or 4 divided by 10. When I divide each of these, I do 1 divided by 3, I get 0.3333333 in my calculator display. Because that 3 keeps going, I show that it is repeated by drawing a line on top of it. When I take 4 over 10, I get an answer of 0 and 4/10. When I take 2 divided by 4, I get an answer of 0 and 5/10. I keep going, 3 divided by 6, or 3 divided by 5, I get 6/10. And the last one, 8 divided by 9, I get 0 and 8/10 repeating. Now, in order to compare these, I have to look at the same place value. So first I begin by looking at the ones place, and I see that all my numbers have a 0. So I move to the number behind the decimal, which is the tenths place, and I see that 3 is smaller than 4, which is smaller than 5, which is smaller than 6, which is smaller than 8. So therefore, I found out how I could put my numbers in order by comparing them to 1/2 using the leg strategy, and I can also, and then regrouping and cross multiplying, or I can turn them into decimals. Here is the second set of numbers. Again, we can use the leg strategy, L for less than 1/2, E for equal to 1/2, and G for greater than 1/2 to help us break down our fractions. Otherwise, we would be cross multiplying these numbers to see which one's larger, and then cross multiplying the smaller one with 4/7, and then comparing whichever one is smaller to 1/2, and then finally to 2/9. It would be a lot of work. So by grouping them and comparing them to 1/2, it helps me to narrow down which numbers will go first and so forth. The second strategy is I can change them into decimals by using division. The fraction bar means to divide. I want you to pause the video and see if you can figure out which of these have an L, which of these have an E, and which has a G. Okay, let's see how you did. I take the denominator 5 and I divide it by 2. I get an answer of 2 and 5/10. 3 is larger than 2 and 5/10, so it gets a G for greater. The second fraction, I take 3 and divide it by 2, I get 1 and 5/10. 2 is larger or greater than 1 and 5/10, so a G for greater. When I take 7 and divide it by 2, I get 3 and 5/10. Remember, I can do all this division in my calculator if I need to. 4 is greater than 3 and 5/10, so all three of these first fractions are greater than 1/2. The next one, I take 2 and divide it by 2, I get 1. We can see by this fraction that 1/2 is equal to 1/2, so it gets an E. And finally, the last one, when I take 9, I divide it by 2, I get 4 and 5/10. My numerator 2 is less than 4 and 5/10, so it gets an L. For this one, we're going to put our orders in number from greatest to least. So that means that I need to begin by looking at all my numbers that are larger than 1/2. That would be all three of these. Take a moment to pause the video, see if you can cross multiply and figure out which of those three fractions is largest. Okay, let's see how you did. Let's take my first two fractions, 3/5 and 2/3. We will cross multiply. 3 times 3 is 9. 5 times 2 is 10. I see that 2/3 is greater than 3/5. So let's take my 2/3 and let's compare it to 4/7. When I cross multiply, I get 14 and I get 12. 14 is larger than 12, so therefore 2/3 is larger than 4/7. 2/3 will be my largest fraction. Now, I don't know about 3/5 and 4/7 and which one's larger, so I'm going to have to do a third cross multiplication, and I'm going to compare 3/5 to 4/7. When I cross multiply, 3 times 7 is 21, and 5 times 4 is 20. 21 is slightly larger, so 3/5 will be my next fraction, and finally 4/7. I've taken care of these three fractions, so they're my greatest. And then I look at the last two numbers that are remaining, last two fractions, and I see that this one, 1/2, is equal to 1/2. So therefore that will come next. And then finally there's only one fraction that is less than 1/2, so that will be my last one. Go ahead and take a moment and pause the video and see if you can change each of these into decimals and see if you can figure out if you put them in the correct order. Okay, here's what you should have had. When I take 2 divided by 3, I get 0.666666. Depending on your calculator, that last digit might be a 7. That just means that the calculator rounded it up. That 6 continues to repeat. When I do 3 divided by 5, I get 0 and 6/10, and it just stops. It's a terminating decimal. 4 divided by 7 gives me a lengthy decimal, so I'm just going to write out the first 3 digits behind the decimal. 1/2 is 0 and 5/10 when I divide. And finally, 2 divided by 9 gives me 0 and 2/10, and that 2 continues to repeat. Now to compare them, I look at my largest place value, which is a 1, the ones place. They all have zeros. I'm then going to move to my tens place. I have a 6 and a 6. Okay, so I have 2 6s, and then I have a 5 and another 5, and then I have a 2. So I have 2 6s right here. I have 2 that have a 5 in the tens place, and then this guy's all by itself. So we know that has to be my last one. So let's check out these groups here. They both have 6s. So I need to go out to my next place value. Well, my next place value, there's nothing here, and there's nothing here. That would be the hundreds place value. So I need to look, and I see that this one has a line above it, which means that if I were to put another digit here, it would have to be a 6. I look at the next number, and there's not a line above this 6. So in order to make this equivalent or take it out to the next place value, I add a 0 behind it. 6 out of 10, or 6/10, is equal to 60 hundredths. So if I were to draw this out here, six of these bars is equal to, if I were to take and draw, let's see if I can do this. Oops. I'm not going to be able to fit all of them in there. But if I were to break that into 100 pieces, it would be 6 rows of 100. So 60 hundredths is the same thing as just 6 of those bars, okay, of tenths. So I can add a 0 to the end. So now I can compare that I have 66 hundredths and I have 60 hundredths. So I know that 66 hundredths is greater than 60 hundredths. So that's good. And then when I look at the next one, I see that they both had 5s in the tenths place that was highlighted in green. If I go to the hundredths place, this one has a 7 right here. This one doesn't have anything there, which is where I add my 0. So 57 hundredths is larger than 50 hundredths. So that's how I compare my decimals. So I know that I did this correctly. Here's your last challenge. Let's try one more. Go ahead and use either the decimal strategy or the leg strategy to figure out which fraction is smallest the whole way to the greatest. Go ahead and pause the video and takes a couple minutes to check it or to solve, and then come back and check. This one should have had a G. This was an L. This was a G. This was an E, a G, and an L, which tells me that I should use my L's first. And when I come over and cross multiply and compare 1/6 and 1/4, I discover that 1/6 is smaller than 1/4. Next, I look for my E, which is 4/8. And then finally, I'm going to look at my 3 G's. And because there's 3 of them, I'm going to come over and cross multiply 2 of them, 9/10 compared to 5/7. When I cross multiply, I figure out that 5/7 is smaller because the 50 is smaller than the 63. So I can compare 5/7 to 2/3. And I cross multiply, I get 15 and 14. And I see that 14 is smaller than 15. So that means that if 5/7 was smaller than 9/10, and then 2/3 was smaller than 5/7, my next smallest number has to be 2/3. And then my next number has to be 5/7, because I know that 5/7 is larger than 2/3, but smaller than 9/10. So that would be my final answer. If I were to have changed these to decimals, I would have gotten the following numbers. So you can see that 1/10, 2/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, and 9/10. It doesn't matter that 714 is a bigger number than 9. When I add 2 zeros behind this to take it out 3 place values, you can see that 714 is smaller than 900,000.